in today's session. QA Babble's been running a number of online webinars throughout lockdown and beyond. Previously, we've held lots of meetups in person for people in the industry to come and share ideas and talk to peers to try and learn something new. The roundtables are a sort of new idea for us, but I know from speaking to you all individually and many more people that there's always a lot of conjecture and a lot of thought about different approaches and different ways of doing things. So before we kick off, certainly I'm conscious that we might have some different opinions on this, and we might not even come to an agreement on all of it. But I know there's lots and lots of experience in the room, and hopefully we can all take something away from it that's useful for us. I've tried to bring together a few different people from kind of different areas within the testing industry, people who are leading testing now, and people who are involved in hands-on automation and have been for a number of years. The intention was to run through 3 different questions today, which are: is there still a place for a test automation engineer within Agile? What the difference between an SDET and a quality engineer is, in your perspective? And a kind of new job title, really, that I've heard a lot more about over the last 6 months or so, and a few companies advertising for, which is a full stack QA engineer. The term full stack is obviously is synonymous with development, where it seems to be a little easier to define the different types of job roles than it is within testing. The test industry seems to be a little bit confused at the moment on what people should be defined as, which I know is frustrating for some people. So whether we can potentially use that job title a bit more in the future. If it's okay, I want to initially go around everyone individually, so you'll get a chance to talk first, and then we'll open up into a free-flowing discussion on all of these 3 questions. So starting off with just introducing a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then talking about specifically a test automation engineer. Do we still need that job title in Agile? Kev, do you want to kick us off?
I can indeed. So my name's Kev McCarthy. I'm one of those people that describes myself as a software development engineer in test, because I am a software development engineer who loves testing. I basically lead teams as a contractor, so I build sort of software testing teams, turn them into SDETs. As to the question of the test automation engineer in Agile, there is always going to be a need for there to be test automation, full stop. Are we ever going to get to the point where everybody that we have in testing has come from the software development background? I certainly hope not. I want people to have come from the business background and product ownership background, because they bring the right techniques and the right mentalities into the subject matter. So I think, yes, people that just automate their manual tests, say using Selenium or QTP or whatever it's called now, I think that is going to go forward, just purely because it makes sense. I'll hand it over to whoever's next.
Sure. Stefan, do you want to pick up?
Hi, so my name is Stefan Jovanovic. I position myself as a test architect, so looking at solutions for how you approach testing across an organization. And so, and this whole conversation about an SDET is particularly pertinent because it's, at the moment, I'm actively recruiting, so and the struggles that I'm having in recruiting. For me, there's a number of factors that we can go down. So one is the difference between testing and quality assurance. And I'm sure we can have a good debate on that on its own right with that. And yes, there's a few nods going around. Yes, it's exactly it's a much wider discussion. But then within testing, there's also the aspects of, are we testing or are we checking? So an awful lot of testing that has been done to date is what, if you were to look up, it's there's a great article by Michael Bolton and James Back about the difference between testing versus checking. Whether or not you agree with it, it's a great article to read and provoke conversation. But an awful lot of work that people do is manual checking. So I have built something, does it do what I've said it will do? You're checking that what you've written is right. The argument there is, yes, we can automate that. How we automate that, then we split into, is that an SDET role or is that a test automation role? Then there is the true testing bit, which if we look at the exploratory testing industry, is vital and valid and definitely has a place, because you need the deviousness of a human to exploit and explore all of the things that can go wrong. And if a good tester can find things that have gone wrong, then fantastic. You know, that needs to be looked at. Whether or not you fix it is a conversation to have with your teams, but it needs to be exploited and it needs to be understood and needs to be realized. So then focusing back onto the automation is that I see an awful lot of CVs of testers who have automated tests through the UI. So they do basically UI checking with an possibly sometimes over-complex, over-bloated test automation framework that they've either bought in or patched together. Whereas what we're talking about, in my mind, from an SDET perspective, is actually a application or system that is actually better engineered than you would ever have your production system built, because it needs to run multiple times a day at volume in real time and be stable and not give you either false positives or false negatives. So actually it is harder and more stringent and more technical than a lot of production systems in terms of what needs to be built. And getting that understanding and getting that concept out and then seeing the appropriate CVs coming through is where I see a struggle. I'll stop at that point.
Okay, all right, thank you. Hayden, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, so my name's Hayden. I've been working in testing or QA or whatever you want to call it since about 2001. And yeah, I was kind of really getting into what Stephen was saying there, actually. I mean, my philosophy around testing and test automation, with test automation in particular, is that your code does need to be you know, of the same standard as production code, but Stephen went a step further, saying it needs to be even better, which I think is you know, great sort of mindset to have. My kind of philosophy is that things don't just need to be good, they need to be better than good, they need to be very good, because what we're talking about here is, as Stephen was saying, systems that are going to be are basically automating the go no go on a release. Eventually, if you have the continuous deployment, then that's what's going on. The tests will are giving you an automated go no go, so there needs to be a very high standard. I don't get too kind of into the discussion about testing versus checking or SDETs versus automation engineer. I think there's always there's a certain body of work that needs to be done in any projects and in any team. And to be honest with you, when I look at a job spec, then I'll actually look at the detail of what it is they're expecting rather than the actual job title, because SDET or automation engineer will mean one thing to one company or one hiring manager and something else to someone else. And like a lot of terms within high tech, they tend to be fairly fluid, and even outside of testing. So I was looking at artificial intelligence the other day, reading up on that, and they don't have like a proper definition for things like deep learning, that kind of thing, and they're trying to kind of evolve towards having a good proper definition so that people actually are speaking the same language. But yeah, I think to go back to your question about the requirement for automation engineering within an agile team, yes, I mean, it's going to be absolutely critical. But also, as Devon was saying, what is also absolutely critical is that devious testing mindset as well, that's going to draw out those edge conditions, those error conditions, get you to the point where we've got a really great set of tests that are going to mitigate risk for you to automate. And I think, so where I've just been at British Airways, we had I had a manual tester on the team with me, and he did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of drawing out those test conditions, actually testing the deliverables, going to the Three Amigos meetings and really sort of drawing out those acceptance criteria. And yes, I think, yeah, automation testing here to stay, most definitely, but as is manual testing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lewis, you just parachuted in. It was my fault. Sorry, there was an issue with the link there. I think some people struggled to get the automated email through Meetup, so thanks for joining. We've done an introduction. We are just going into the first question, which is there still a place for a test automation engineer within Agile? We're going to move on to talking specifically about the job title and phrase SDET, but initially we're talking about test automation engineer. I suppose really the question is, do we see that as being a different job to what an SDET is, which I think Stefan mentioned briefly, that there is a difference there. I think Kev did as well. And yeah, if you can just introduce yourself and the type of work you do.
Well, I'm Luis. I've been working in software quality, QA, testing, you name it, for about 30 years now. In fact, I started when there was no testing yet in IT. I mean, there was no something called testing really. So now when I heard about talking about automation, it seems that it's something new to a lot of people. It's been in place for a long time. And as I used to say, I'm maybe a bit provocative saying that automation is the stupidest thing you can do in testing, which doesn't add any value in terms of the quality. They just add value in terms of speed. So some company and people mix things together and they say, we do automation because we want better quality, which is insane for me. It's like you want a fast car to go quicker to a place. The problem is you don't know how to drive, so your fast car won't help you very much. So, and it comes back to the SDET, depending on the company and the experience, and I would say the vision they have about testing. They might want someone to do just automation, coding. In that case, I would say take a developer. Or they want someone to do testing. In that case, take a good manual tester and complement his lack of technology or technical skills by a developer. It's very rare to have a good developer and a good tester in the same person. You find some, but usually they're not used in the right place because either they're shifting too much into automation and they focus on testing. So it's basically based on the experience and on the culture of the company, of the people, where this role is applied.
Okay, thanks. Saurabh, are you there?
Yeah, still here. So my name is Saurabh. I work for Which, the review site and magazine, and I've been in QA for about since 2000 really. Yeah.
Wow.
So in terms of I mean, definitely test automation is here to stay. I think some of the pertinent points that have been already poised here are relevant. In terms of yes, we do need automation, but we also need a really good critical testing mindset to actually employ it in the right way. So definitely we need, I mean, just writing beautiful code doesn't suffice. It needs to be for finding. It's just not, you know, automating happy parts, just making things easy, you know, just improving speed. So yeah, so I think the closer you sit to the development side of things, it's better, shifting left to improving quality, getting that much earlier on in the process. And a little bit more controversially, what we're seeing, like what Matt was saying earlier about a whirlwind of like different terminologies describing job titles, the full stack QA, things like we're experimenting with at the moment is, instead of going quality assurance, we're doing quality assist. We're kind of like transferring a lot of that testing knowledge into the devs rather than having those silos and bottlenecks. And where the testers are not only doing some automation, but also the devs are doing automation around that. And the testers, like Matt said, are with that capacity created for automation, and some of that shared responsibility of automation, with that capacity created in time, is then going a step forward and helping find fixing issues that they're finding. So yeah, I mean, so definitely test automation is not going anywhere anytime soon. I think it's going to be more inherent, more critical as we go along. But in the general sense of things, are we focusing too much on coding and not kind of like encouraging best practices around exploratory testing, really thinking out of the box, etc.? Yeah, it's yeah. That's for me.
Okay, cool. Thank you. It's a good start. We've got lots to carry on to talk about from now. Dave?
Hi, how's it going? Yeah, my name's David Clark. I've got 16 years of experience in software testing. Gee, I started back 2003 over at Egg. So the couple of questions that you've asked, is there still a place for the test automation engineer in Agile? I think as long as there's a tester in the Agile process, that's great. And to have a person, they call themselves a test automation engineer, who has the ability to write automated tests, that's a bonus. I think the difference between like a test automation engineer and an SDET, I think it's their background. From what I remember meeting an SDET for the first time about 10 years ago. And yeah, they knew testing, but they weren't of like the manual testing mindset. They were developers. And they were switched on around creating test automation frameworks to make these mundane testing tasks automatable. So the software developer in test, they're schooled in software development and deep knowledge of software development principles, and have moved over to testing. But I think the test automation engineer, from what I've seen, what I've experienced, they've been schooled in QA principles. They do have software development skills, which is varying, and they pick up some along the way. But there are some test automation engineers, if you say to them, please, could you create a framework for us to automate these tests, they might just turn to the software developer to assist them. So, but the test that I'd say an SDET would write compared to a test automation engineer, I have a hunch that a test automation engineer would probably write better quality tests because of their grounding in testing principles.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's. I mean, generally, I think testing struggles for a bit of an identity because of the fact that there's still a debate that rages on about is it testing or is it quality assurance? And then that then drips down into, for me, all these different types of job titles that we've just spoken about there, because one person's or one company's software developer in test is totally different to another's. And I think sadly, because it's become quite a sort of fashionable job title, it gets picked up quite freely, particularly by startups and companies who are looking to create the right brand image. And actually, that job role isn't what some of you described as a SDET. It's something quite different. It's basically someone who's purely a tester who's got a little bit of automation experience. It's not a proper developer, which Kev started out by saying that he was. He's a developer, but he chooses to work in testing.
That's why you have to be really careful with job descriptions when you're looking at roles, because I mean that's what I've had to do since lockdown, because the British Airways showed all the contracts. I've been keeping an eye on the market, obviously. But yes, there's very much, like you're saying, there's very much one company's definition will be completely different to someone else's, and yeah, you have to be careful if you to be to make sure you're a good fit, basically. Yeah, it's not going to work out.
To me, an SDET needs to be able to do NUnit as easily as they can do Selenium. They are, I know it's in advance of the title, the full stack QA engineer. Well, the title really does already exist in SDET, because that's really what it is. It's that cross all boundaries, someone that can do unit testing, but integration testing, database testing, load testing, performance testing. That's what you want from an SDET, and that is the classic definition of an SDET. And I think I said to you, Matt, in a conversation that it's a trendy title and people like trendy titles. So if the trendy title becomes full stack QA engineer, everybody will move to it because that's the in thing to call people.
It's a bit like DevOps has got that that sort of stigma now, hasn't it? So yeah, not necessarily doing DevOps, so we just say we're doing DevOps.
Well, the conversation around Agile, probably less so now because I think more companies are there. But if you go back like a few years, it was the same with Agile. Like, oh, are you Agile? Oh, yeah, we are. Yeah. Yeah,
we do stand-ups. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
so can I just make come in a couple of points? So one of the things about differentiating between a developer and a tester, I completely agree with that. When for many years I've been saying, developers are creatively constructive, whereas testers are creatively destructive.
Yes.
So you test it, and they will spend hours working out how to break it. But that's not the right attitude. If you're a developer, as a developer, you want to go, here's my problem. So, right, what are the 10 different ways I can make this work? And then what's the best way I can make that work? So it's balancing those views. Go on. Yeah. Go on, Kev.
I was about to say, what you're saying is similar to something I say, which is that a developer is an artist and a tester is a scientist.
That's not a bad analogy. That's not a bad analogy.
So
to me, the difference, can I just come in and just say, to me, the difference between testing and an SDET is, for me, the SDET is the technician of a group. And I don't mean, and by technician, I mean they have to be highly, highly skilled. Their coding skills have to be as good as a developer. And often I've found some of my best SDETs are actually developers, because what I need them to build is a framework that will allow me to deploy a change into production in a matter of minutes. I say minutes, let's make it a couple of hours. But by the time it's got into production, that change needs to have been fully automatedly tested. Once it's deployed, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's released for people to use. But what I need is to know that once that change is sitting in production, it's not going to break anything, and it's stable, active, meets all its security needs. The only way I can do that in the minutes and hours that we need to drive towards is through automation. On releasing, though, I still want to make sure that actually does this actually fix the problem that I've got? In which case, I want somebody manually to look at this. So the way I see it, an SDET is like the technician, the engineer who builds my framework, that builds something that I can hook in my API level testing, my UI-based testing, my security testing, my performance testing. And I can control that through my CI/CD pipeline without any manual intervention.
That's just the development role you're describing there, isn't it?
It is, but it's somebody who understands testing and understands.
But it's so I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, but that's what you're saying is absolutely critical, the quality of that framework. But then you can have the best framework in the world, but if the tests are of poor quality and they don't mitigate risk, then it hasn't achieved anything. So that's what I was just thinking, and I'm sure you're probably going to get
so the point I was going to move on to is to say that the SDET in effect provides the engine, and then sitting on top of it, I've got my testers who manually test and explore the products and do all of the good thing about, is this truly usable? Does the look and feel of this, is this right? Because these are things that a machine can never tell me, or certainly not for the foreseeable future. I'm sure at some point we'll be able to get to that point. But then for me, the test automation guy is the person who sits alongside the testers to take those tests and split them in such a way to make them automatable using the framework that's been developed by the SDET. So I've got this notion of a 3-tier approach, and each tier is needed to provide the foundations for the other one to work from.
So in your description, you're describing things like the SDET will build a tool and the tester will use. But if the SDET are building a tool, they're not testers, they're just developers.
And as I've said, yes, in some cases, often the best SDETs I found are actually good developers with some knowledge of testing.
If you go back to the history of testing, I mean, initially, automation was done by a different team from the testing team. You have a group of people writing test cases, and they were giving them to a different team who knew tools, specialized tools.
The bad old days of waterfall.
I mean, at that time, we had two different set of people. One having a more analytic mind, writing test cases, and another one more technical skills, writing automation.
Yes, I remember the roles of test analyst.
And you're describing the same thing. You're describing a team of technical people writing a tool and a team of analytic people writing test cases.
I would challenge the idea.
I'm just gonna let Giuseppe join in because I'm conscious he's joined in halfway through. So Giuseppe, thanks for joining us.
Sorry, apologies.
No worries. I'll just let you know where we're at. You can probably tell already. You joined a very active discussion, which I expect it to be, the people in the room, about obviously about software quality, but we're talking about the difference in our mind between what a test automation engineer does and what we feel a software development engineering tester, an SDET, does, because as a background to this, one of the reason why I set this up was that I felt there seems to be a lot of confusion in the industry on the job title SDET. It gets banded around a lot, and a lot of the time the meaning behind it is vastly different, and it creates a lot of confusion, certainly in my job and the people that I talk to when they're applying for jobs, that they go into roles and it's way off what their expectation is in terms of the day-to-day responsibilities. Do you want to just kind of introduce yourself and tell us a bit of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, well, actually, I know a few people on the call anyway. So Hayden, I worked with. Louis, we met at the meetup recently, I believe. And Stefan on another call as well. So I guess my background is I'm a tester all my career, 25 years now. I started testing blue screens and more recently kind of leading QA capabilities across Just T and ASOS. So yeah, I've seen all flavors of kind of quality engineers, testers, QAs. But yeah, no, please carry on and I'll join in.
Sure.
What I was about to say was not all SDETs are devs with a little bit of testing. Some of us committed to being testers. I went to ParExcel having been a dev and said, right, I really want to be a tester. And I was taught how to be a tester from first principles. I've watched just about every James Back video.
He's a legend.
I've read the book by Elizabeth Hendrickson, Explore It, which is basically the book on exploratory testing. So to be an SDET, yes, I think you're right. You need to be a developer with test capabilities, but I think if you're going to be a good one, you need to commit totally. You need to go, if I am going to be a tester, I'm going to be a tester. I'm going to bring all my skills along and be something different. And that's what I like to think I've done.
I think that's quite a rare transition to make, actually, from going from development but really embracing the test mindset, which is, what sounds like what you've really done, Kevin. Which is really admirable.
Oh,
because I think it's quite a rare thing, but I think it's something we'll probably see a lot more of, actually, in the future. But again, just to go back to what we've already said about this subject, I mean, I did some Googling on this earlier, and what people mean by SDET is just so contingent on their own particular requirements. I've just got a job opportunity for Amazon sitting in front of me here, and it says a software development engineer and test is a developer with the primary responsibility of writing frameworks. So that's very much sort of is what Stephen was saying, but another company would have a very different opinion of it. So it's horses for course, I suppose, in some ways, really.
But that's what frustrates me, because ultimately that does lead to companies' expectations not being met quite often, because they're sort of picking up, as we've said, a sort of fashionable job title, and they're defining it as very different things often. I think what Stefan said about kind of isolating that and saying that fundamentally that person is a developer. Ultimately, the job title is software development engineer in test, so it is a software developer, or it should be, but they're responsible for something to do with testing, not to do with building software. And then you've got other roles, which makes sense to me: a test automation engineer, and maybe a quality engineer, who do different parts of the test process. But generally, SDET gets banded around, and quite often they could be doing exploratory testing for 90% of the day, and then maybe picking up a tool that the company's already got and running some scripts that someone else wrote before they joined, and their jobs and they apply for a job, and they're nowhere near what the next company want.
I think one of the critical factors here is the context of the role that people are trying to do it within, because I think DevOps is much talked about. So DevOps is in a similar state as to where Agile was possibly about 10 years ago, where a lot of people want it, not necessarily know what it is, and certainly don't have a grasp yet of the level of technology change needed.
And microservices is another thing where that's happening as well.
Yeah. Yes. I mean. Yes. I mean.
Yeah. People
more
getting
often
shot,
not,
shooting themselves in the foot.
Go on. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I mean, the idea is that it's you use DevOps to deliver microservices because there's small standalone pieces of. There's a lot of autonomy between what you're developing and shipping out. Similarly, there's all sorts of, they're looking at applying micro servlets and micro websites. So you apply the same principles as you would for microservices in how you deploy and deliver a website. So you can safely deliver UI functionality without impacting anything else that's on your site or through your application. And with those technologies, that drives a very different need and a very different type of person to support that, because and I'm working with companies where, you know, if it takes more than a week to ship something into production, that's too long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's good, but we still have all of the compliance changes. You know, regulatory impacts are everywhere. You no longer have to work in finance or insurance to be have those disciplines needed on you. I mean, taking any type of payment immediately implies that you've got to have certain pieces built into your system to maintain that level of security. So where am I going with this is that I think it's the technology stack that your organization is trying to deliver determines the type of role that you need. And I think the term SDET is a sexy one in the marketplace at the moment. So I think lots of people have picked up on that. And lots of people are picking up on this terminology with the view that they want to move into DevOps.
Yeah.
But the reality is for some organizations that will never happen. And so they end up with a mash of a QA automation person with some engineering skills to do pseudo waterfall disguised as agile. Does that make sense? Anybody agree or disagree?
Yeah, we've all seen poor implementations of agile.
That's a very lack of culture in testing in general. Some companies have been, because they have automation, they think they're testing. Which so you take some SDET profile and you make it doing some scripting, and they build scripts and have hundreds of thousands of scripts. So at the end, they have a green light or a red light. And usually, when I come on board with this kind of companies, the first thing I ask is, "What are you testing?" And usually, I don't have any answer. They don't know what they're testing; they're just running scripts. So if you want to deliver very quickly, every 2 hours or every 5 minutes, yeah, put some scripts. Doesn't mean that you're testing; you're just giving the feedback to your managers. So if the managers don't understand what they're doing, they got what they got, what they're paying for. So
I think
it's based on what you have.
I think so. Something you have to remember is that companies go through a journey of getting from doing things one way to going through to a more ideal way of implementing things. I mean, the big unicorns have all been through that journey as well. If you look at the history of Google and Amazon, Netflix, they went through a process of doing things really badly for a time, and then they kind of evolved to a position where they're doing things hopefully pretty well. You would think so, but yeah, I'm sure there's pockets of non good practice there as well. But yeah, I think everyone goes through that journey, and a lot of the roles I end up in these days are helping with that transition of getting from a point where people they really need to get their automation down really well, and they still need to have that testing capability in terms of exploratory testing, all that skill set as well. But yeah, often there's what hasn't come up so far is the fact that often we can be involved in these transformations, and you start to need to develop the transformative skill set as well to be able to help to assist with that, which is perhaps a subject for another discussion, Matt. I don't know. But yeah, everyone's on this journey, I think, and we need to help people get to that good place.
And it is more complex than people think. I read, not recent, I mean, last time I read it was like 10 years ago. There was a report from the Gartner Group about automation in the testing world. And even though the first automation tools were launched in the 90s, 15 years after, they did a survey. And they realized that only 3% of the companies are getting benefits from the automation, which means automation can be very nice at the beginning. You take someone and early stage, you have a record playback approach. Now you are more advanced, you do some programming, and you have developers doing some scripting. But you build 1 script, 2 scripts, 10 scripts, 100, thousands, and realize that the maintenance is a pain. So you drop your tests because you can't maintain all of them. And when you realize your tests are useless because you're not testing anymore automatically. So you invest a lot of money, but after 3-6 months, you realize that you can't use it anymore. So the result is very negative. So doing it the right way.
That's where your BDD and automated specifications comes in, isn't it? So if you have a failing test, then you pull the virtual and-on cord or whatever it is, and you swarm it to get it sorted. So your gherkin should always represent accurately what's going on. So hopefully
I'm not talking about
BDD
the gherkin.
should help with that.
I'm talking about the gherkin. I'm talking about the quality of your technical stack to run your tests. You organize your module, your scripting, your objects, everything. If it's done the wrong way, every time you change something in your system, you spend more time maintaining the script than doing the test. So if you're a manager and say, I want to have it quicker, and quicker, okay, at the beginning will be quicker because you have scripts, but after 6 months, after a year, after 10, 15 release of your software, you come back to you, say, oh, I can't test it. It takes me 2 days because I have to maintain my script. And then you say, oh, why am I investing all that money in automation with no result? And automation is just, it's not only doing scripting and programming. There's a bigger approach. It's like building a software. You have to follow the same software approach on software engineering approach to have it done correctly. And obviously, if you don't look at it this way, you're just wasting your time.
So I think one of the key things is what do we mean by test automation? What tests are we automating? So I'm a great fan of the automation pyramid, or the testing pyramid. Just look it up online. There's plenty of examples of it. But basically, two aspects. It's saying, you've got at the base of it, you've got unit testing. At the middle, you've got API, and at the top, you've got UI. There's different ways of interpreting, but the key is that the bulk of your automation is at the unit testing and at the API level. The testing at the user interface level is expensive, it's slow, it's time consuming, and it's brittle. So if you are doing a lot of, if your focus is purely on UI test automation, you're on a loser right from the start.
Yes.
No, I mean, GTS knows that because I've been quite polemic about that. I don't believe that in pyramid. I for myself, I don't care about unit testing at all. In fact, if there is unit testing or not, it doesn't change, because my goal is not about the quality of the code, the quality of your system, which is totally different.
Yeah, but you can unit tests can capture some of the that stuff you need to automate.
Yeah. I'm not saying we shouldn't do them. I'm saying unit testing is good for stability of your code.
No, I think you can actually test low-level functions with unit tests, and so I wouldn't rule it out completely. But yeah, in general, it's you wouldn't get that much functional coverage with it, but you can get some depending on the software you're talking about.
I would say it's more beneficial for the developer itself, so you can be more confident about this piece of code is changing, than for the outcome of your system, and especially if you have integration. So I'm more focusing on the UI and the APIs. Everything under, for me, is useless. And when you say, and because now the technology allows it, you can be as efficient and as quick and performant as those layers and unit testing. If I take my experience at this moment, I'm running about 6,000 tests every hour, and I'm just covering the UI. So you have the technology for it.
Can I just move us on, if I can, because I'm conscious of time. I've allocated another 10 minutes, and I appreciate this is lunchtime for most people. You've got other things to do. The final point I wanted to come to, we've touched on the job title already, is that of a full stack QA engineer. So one of the things that I see often is a lot of startups will, because of the fact that they want to have this right sort of brand image, their first testing role, before they've hired anyone else in quality or testing, it will be an SDET. That happens so often. Like, they've got 6 members of staff, they've got 4 software engineers, product owner, and they want to hire a tester, and they call it an SDET. And from some of the conversations we've had so far, it sounds like that probably wouldn't be the right terminology, because ultimately no one's going to be actually looking at the quality then. Someone's going to be building the framework and writing code, but they're potentially not actually focused on quality. So a full stack QA engineer is something I've heard a fair bit about over the last kind of 6 months or so. Do you think that's a good way of just kind of bringing most of this together and having someone who can do all of these things to a degree?
My problem with the title is the fact that it's focusing on engineer and not tester. I think it's very important to put that test emphasis on there. I think this idea that we're moving towards being full stack engineers is a slightly dangerous one, and quality assurance is different to testing. They're two totally separate things.
Well, that's the next roundtable discussion, Kev. That one.
Yeah,
yeah. On a lot of or testing, or both, or none. Okay. So, Kev,
I'd also chip in that some of these systems that we are now delivering are so complex and so integrated that the notion of having a person that can test the whole lot is, I think, a bit of a misnomer. We've got people who can test aspects of it, and we've got people who can understand how parts of that are used by the business. But I think with some of these enterprise-wide solutions, having one team that we expect with a small number of people in it that can know everything about the whole stack is a false idea. We're applying, we've got this idea, oh yeah, it's only an app. Oh, so that person can really know that and know what but it's, these people generally don't, because they're so focused in on testing, they don't use it in production. They're not the end user. They don't have the vision that the organization has on how this will progress. So that they can feed into it, but it's getting the right people into testing it and expecting one, AQA to understand the full stack and be able to assess the right level of quality of that to release it and get the full business benefit out of it is a bit of a misnomer. And I think that we're setting up people to fail with that title.
I mean, the question that Matt's posing is about a kind of a generalist SDET or a generalist quality engineer, and that does imply a kind of general skill set across the board. And I mean, I think that in terms of like a startup context, does sound like quite a good idea, because the stuff actually does need testing. You do need to draw out all of those error conditions, all those edge cases. You need to have that devious mindset, but also you don't want to be rerunning every 2 weeks a whole bunch of regression tests and driving yourself insane with boredom and wasting your time. So kind of full stack QA engineer is quite a good idea. But I mean, I think again, you'll have individuals who would be up for that, but you have individuals who just want to automate, and you'll have individuals who want a more manual biased role. So it is just matching the individual to the role. And as a recruiter, Matt, I guess you have a bit of a hard time sometimes really bottoming out what the company really needs and trying to match up candidates with that role. But I think the idea is a pretty good one.
Yeah. The question I have is, why, if we say this person is a test analyst, are we assuming they don't know how to do automation?
I think, well, certainly from my perspective, it's the use of the word, rightly or wrongly, but I think this is how the industry sees it. The use of the word engineer changes things a little bit, because I think when you say engineer, people start to assume that this person's more technical. When you say test analyst, because that title test,
call it a test engineer.
Okay, yeah, test engineer seems to have been replaced a little bit by using the word quality. People now, that's like quality engineer, and you don't really see test engineer and even test analyst that much anymore. I don't know what do you think of that?
Let me just add a few thoughts. So in the last two organizations, this debate of course continues, but what I've settled on is quality engineer, and that's, again, depends on context and the premise you set. So more recently, I set the premise that, of course, everybody expects the whole team to do testing. Yeah, and that's the agile principle, is everybody tests, everybody's responsible for quality. So the title of quality engineer is, they're looking at quality engineering practices throughout the chain. So, how are the stories coming in? Are they well defined? Is there a criteria for kind of definition of done, definition of readiness? They're also looking within the pipeline to understand, automation pyramid was mentioned, is, are we testing the right things at the right point? Yeah, and are we quality isn't just about the end product. Quality is also about how we are writing code. Is it written in a safe way? Is it written in a maintainable way? Is it written in a way that can be deployed and rolled back? So quality isn't just about testing. So if you're just focusing on testing and checking, of course, test engineering, test analyst is the words. But if in modern agile practices, it's all about quality practices throughout the life cycle. And what I settled upon and what I then built the capability on is quality engineering is the title. And effectively, you're a quality engineering coach for that team. Because again, what we found is...
are you saying that a quality engineer in your context will do code review?
Sorry, Luis, say that again for me.
Are you saying that in your context, a quality engineer will do code review?
Yes.
Okay. So it's a developer who understands the quality process.
What resonates with me is when I had discussion with Simon Stewart, one of the founders of Selenium. He said is if the purpose of the team is to solve a problem through code, why do you have a member of a team who doesn't understand code? Because that's the sole purpose of the unit of people that gather there.
No,
that's a very developer-centric view.
Yeah,
I mean, it's valid up to a point, I think, but then again, you need someone who's going to test the backside of something as well.
Well, let me complete. So complete in the sense that if that team isn't able to talk the same language, it's like, okay, I've written a function and that function does this, and if the tester says, or if the guy who's doing testing says, well, I'm independent, I don't want you corrupting me on the way I test. That goes back to the old ways of throw the code over the fence and waterfall testing. The premise here is I don't need to be an expert coder, but I want you to sit with me and even just talk pseudocode language to say, okay, my function is going to be handling this, and if I get an error condition, this is what's going to be popping out, and if volume comes through, this is how we'll handle it. And what the quality engineer is doing is challenging them to say, well, what if this happens? What if there's a time zone change? What if this scenario happens? And that individual isn't able to challenge if they're not able to converse with a developer, or the developer isn't able to converse with a tester in that same language. Because if they don't talk in the same language, there is a wall, and you are doing waterfall testing.
Yeah, so I think in my mind, in my mind, there's. Sorry, go for it, Lou.
No, I'm saying the fact that it's waterfall testing doesn't mean it's bad.
No. I've delivered successful flight safety critical systems using waterfall, and there's aircraft flying with software that was developed using that.
You're totally right. I mean, agility is nothing to do with sequence of tasks. It's just about an approach, a different approach.
Yeah. So I think the key here is that I think a lot of testers give themselves a QA title, but actually all that they have the accountability and responsibility for is to test. So actually they're testers who've rebranded as QA and don't have. I was the QA manager for a startup company, and I changed my job title. As I said to the director, I refused to have the title QA because you've not given me permissions to review the code. You've not given me permissions to review and challenge how you've structured your requirements. You've not given me how you structure the support system. You've not given me the authority to do an awful lot of stuff that a true QA should do. And therefore, actually, I will not take the QA title. And we agreed to the change. So I became a test manager running a team of people who evaluate, who tested code and tested solutions, but not QA. And my big thing about the market is that a lot of people mark themselves as QA engineers, but actually all they are testers. They have no responsibility or authority to challenge how anything else in the process is done to deliver the right level of quality.
Do you think that's diminishing now? Because I think a lot of companies now are getting it in terms of the fact that, as Jitesh is saying, you need to be an advocate for quality right from the word go throughout the whole of the stack, like you're saying, Stephen. Because I know ASOS nailed it because Jitesh was in charge there. But other companies I've been to since and hopefully about to go to, in terms of one I'm about to join, hopefully, they really get it. They really want to have that quality focus throughout the life cycle, be that advocate across development, into the right through into the business actually as well. So yeah, I just wondered if in your experience, that's the kind of just go and test stuff mentality is kind of diminishing now, and more companies are getting it. If you see what I mean?
They're getting it, but they're not putting the means to get it.
Yeah.
Which means they want to do it, but at the end, the QA don't have any practical impact on the dev.
Well, I guess my view on that is, Hayden, is there's a journey to be had. At ASOS, I think before you arrived, we'd gone through a lot of pain. Yeah, and pain is what then people look, okay, we need a problem to be solved, and that solution is, okay, we need better quality practices coming in. And similarly at Just Eat, we in 2015-16, we had systems that were falling over, and through that we drove in quality practices, and not just through testers. We held developers accountable to quality of their code, but they needed help as well. It's like, well, what does good quality look like? What does good coverage look like? Yes. What does maintainable code look like? And this is where the quality engineering coaches come in. They should have the depth of experience and the breadth of knowledge to be able to work with teams to say, like, guys, this is what good looks like. But there has to be a journey of pain before the leadership realize that we need quality engineers.
I'd like to say, Jitesh, I love the fact that you're talking extreme programming. It's a 20-year-old concept. It led into Agile. But it's still the most valid. I do most of my teaching of people I try to turn into SDETs from one side or the other, whether they're developers coming to testing or testers coming to development. I want them to pair as much as possible, both with me and with each other.
If I can suggest, I experimenting, in the last company I've been working, an approach which is totally a bit extreme is the testers are driving the development, which means the developer reports to the tester. So the tester is in charge of accepting from the BA and delivering after dev. And the developer talk to the tester, and that's it. So once the story is acceptable by the tester, he's in charge of pushing it up to release, but he's in charge, he's the guy taking decisions.
I don't know, Stefan, you said you worked with aircraft companies, yes?
Yes, that's right.
So same as we with some medical companies. When it is mission critical that does not fail or people die, you do tend to have a QA sign off on the code. I remember at Porexel actually having to sign pieces of paper for the auditors.
Right.
So
personal liability.
Second,
personal liability.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I worked for Rolls-Royce on the aero engines, so I was working on the flight engine controls systems for large gas turbines. So these are the engines that go onto the Boeing 777s and so on. So one of them goes wrong. Yeah, people know, but I'll leave it at that. But the way that the engineering practice was done was that all of the testing was automated. Unit testing, we had very explicit. At the time, it was linear sequencing and jump LSCG type code coverage, and the people who wrote the code had to demonstrate that. Similarly, with the integration testing, multiple layers of integration. I remember crawling around inside an aircraft looking at how cables were connected inside the aircraft to make sure that it was connected, that we've got enough resiliency in the connections and so on. So it's a very different world, but the majority of the testing there is automated. And within that system, and we're talking, when I joined, it was early 90s. we were talking about being able to run tests and then storing the results and the ability to replicate the exact test for 5 years, because we had certification authorities. Basically, the CAA could come back to us at any point and say, within 5 years, if there was an incident, say, reproduce the problem you had. And we had to be able to reproduce that problem. Now, a lot of businesses haven't got the scope to spend the money that is needed to build that level of infrastructure. So I'm not saying that everybody should do that. I'm just saying that these techniques that we're talking about have been around for many, many years, well over 30 years and beyond. And we're not talking about anything new. It's just the context that we're applying it into now is more and more of the business software, because these tools are more and more accessible to us to use. Now, within the flight safety area, though, I was the test manager or the validation manager, going really old school in terminology. But I had a QA manager who sat alongside me, and together we would go and audit other companies. But he had the ultimate responsibility for quality, and his was about the process. Is the engineering practices right? Are people trained to the right level? Are we using the right specs? Are we using the right tools? You know, have we validated the tools? Now, Rolls-Royce is an engineering company, so within there, if you talk of quality, you know, all of the tools are quality assessed. There's maintenance cycles and quality standards that are set on every tool that you use. So if you're using a drill bit, it has a shelf life, and if you've expired that shelf life, you either throw it away or recalibrate it. And there's a huge amount of work which we don't do within software engineering. So to me, quality engineering is a specific and phenomenal piece of work, but it's separate to testing.
Guys, I'm going to, if I can keep you just for 1 second. I think we've had a question on the YouTube channel, and if I can keep you just for a few, if you need to jump off, I understand, but someone's put a question on here. It's someone I know quite well, actually, he describes himself as a test automation engineer, and he's put, if a test automation engineer was capable of doing all things an SDET could, would anyone on the call dismiss them for a job just because of their title?
No.
What's in a name, as they say?
Don't care what the title is. I've had SDETs that are actually test automation engineers. Had someone come forward saying they're a test automation engineer, and they're better than half the developers on the team. So,
which to be honest, kind of brings it back fairly neatly to the whole purpose behind getting you together, other than the fact that I do enjoy chatting to you all, is that this is a bit of a challenge for the industry, where, you know, different job titles can mean different things to different people, and someone who classifies themselves as a test automation engineer could also be suitable for an SDET role, even though we've kind of decided today that an SDET is actually something slightly different, because the industry's got this kind of these confused labels. People can certainly be more than one thing to different companies. I am conscious of time, so I'm going to wrap it up there. I really appreciate everyone getting involved, so thank you. I hope you all enjoyed it. It was an active discussion, so it sounds like you did. I knew we wouldn't agree on everything, but I think we did certainly on some things.
We got close.
We got close. So we were on YouTube. It was available on YouTube. Some people were watching, believe it or not. So feel free. I'll send you a link to that. You can have a look at it. We're going to do more roundtables in the future. We've come up with a few ideas of what those could be about. I'd love for you guys to be involved. So I'll send you a bit of a feedback email at some point over the next 24 hours, which I'd appreciate your thoughts on.
Sigma, man. Sigma.
Okay.
V model.
V model.
CMMI. There we go.
CMMI. What I'd personally be interested in talking about next time is actually qualifications for testers, and whether there's any space for those.
I use my own test for that. So
you use your own, but every company's got a different test. What if we had something across the industry that was recognised and respected?
Well, isn't that what the ISTQB stuff is supposed to be?
Suppose you say, right,
I just realised I'm in public. I shouldn't be shaking hands.
Maybe there's something we can do around that, because that's, again, quite a hot debate, I know, in the industry.
The problem with certification is most of them are just learning definitions. And you have the candidate who has a nice certification to write a test case. He doesn't know how to do it.
It's a subject for next time. But yeah, I appreciate you all coming along. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very
much. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Pleasure
Matt.
meeting everybody. Thank you.
Cheers, then. Bye then.
Bye-bye.